The sound of a palm striking flesh echoed through the obsidian room, silencing the clinking of crystal glasses and hushed conversations of New York's elite. Everyone froze, except for one man. When a heavily pregnant Elara gripped her stinging red cheek, staring in shock at the woman who had just assaulted her, her husband didn't stand up to defend her. He didn't call security. Instead, Bennett Thorne threw his head back and laughed. He took a sip of his scotch and grinned at his mistress. "She has a point, honey. You really should have stayed home." He thought he was untouchable. He thought he had married a poor, defenseless orphan. He was about to find out that the woman he'd just humiliated was the only reason he still had a career, and her father was about to land the family jet right on top of his life. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the Obsidian Room Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop restaurant. It was the kind of place where the menus didn't list prices, and the waiters knew your net worth before they poured your water. Elara sat at table 4, clutching her clutch bag tightly against her swollen stomach. She was 8 months pregnant. Her ankles were swollen, and the dress she wore, a simple off-the-rack navy blue maternity gown, felt woefully inadequate compared to the diamonds dripping off the women at the surrounding tables. Across from her sat Bennett Thorne. He was handsome, in that sharp, predatory way that Wall Street adored. His bespoke charcoal suit fit him perfectly, and his eyes were glued to his phone. "Bennett," Elara said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Happy anniversary." Bennett didn't look up. He scrolled through an email, his thumb flicking impatiently. Happy anniversary. Look, Elara, let's make this quick. I have a meeting at 9. Elara felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. "A meeting tonight. But it's our 3rd anniversary. And the baby is due in 4 weeks. I thought we could talk about the nursery. You haven't even seen the paint samples." Bennett finally looked up, his expression a mix of boredom and irritation. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Elara, don't start nagging. I'm working my ass off to pay for this lifestyle. Do you have any idea what the mortgage on the penthouse costs? No, you don't. Because you've never paid a bill in your life." That wasn't true. Elara had paid for plenty quietly using accounts Bennett knew nothing about. But she had played the role of the supportive, humble wife because she wanted to be loved for herself, not the Sterling family name. She wanted to believe Bennett loved her, not the billions her estranged father Silas Sterling controlled. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking down. "I just miss you." "You're suffocating me," Bennett snapped, signaling the waiter for another drink. "Honestly, looking at you lately, you've let yourself go. Being pregnant isn't an excuse to look like a frump." Elara blinked back tears. Before she could respond, the air in the restaurant seemed to shift. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the silence that followed wasn't respectful. It was stunned. Walking in was a woman who looked like she had been poured into a red silk dress. She was blonde, striking, and radiated a malicious kind of confidence. It was Sienna Miller, the daughter of a mid-level real estate developer, a woman known in the tabloids for wrecking marriages and spending money she didn't earn. She wasn't being seated. She was walking straight toward table 4. Bennett's face changed instantly. The irritation vanished, replaced by a smirk he tried to hide behind his glass. "Well, well," Sienna announced, her voice loud enough to carry to the VIP section. "If it isn't the charity case." Elara looked up confused. "Excuse me?" Sienna stopped right at their table, placing a manicured hand on Bennett's shoulder. Bennett didn't flinch. He didn't push her hand away. He leaned into it. "Bennett," Elara said, her breath hitching. "Who is this? Oh, stop playing dumb, you cow!" Sienna spat, looking Elara up and down with disgust. "I'm the woman who makes him happy. I'm the one he goes to when he's tired of looking at your miserable, bloated face." The restaurant had gone deathly quiet. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. At the next table, a senator lowered his newspaper. "Bennett," Elara pleaded, looking at her husband. "Tell her to leave." Bennett set his glass down. He looked at Elara with cold, dead eyes. "Why would I do that? Sienna is the only exciting thing in my life right now. We were going to tell you after the baby came, but, well, Sienna is impatient." "We're in love," Sienna cooed, leaning down to kiss Bennett's cheek. "And we're tired of waiting for you to sign the papers. Bennett needs a wife who fits his image, not some pathetic orphan he picked up at a library." Elara felt the world spinning. "I'm carrying your child," she whispered, her voice cracking. "And that's the only reason you're still in the penthouse," Sienna snapped. "You're an incubator. Once that kid is out, you're on the street." Sienna reached for the glass of water on the table, Elara's water, and splashed it onto Elara's lap. The cold liquid soaked through the dress, chilling her skin, but the shock was colder. "Oops," Sienna smirked. "Looks like your water broke. You should leave." Elara, shaking, grabbed the edge of the table to hoist herself up. The humiliation was burning her skin. "You are disgusting," Elara said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "Both of you. Bennett, how could you—" "Don't talk to him like that," Sienna screamed. And then it happened. Sienna drew back her hand and swung with all her might. Crack! The sound was sickeningly loud. The slap caught Elara square on the cheek, snapping her head to the side. The force of it made her stumble, catching herself on the back of the chair to keep from falling onto her stomach. The room gasped. A waiter dropped a tray. Elara stood there, her cheek throbbing, a red handprint blooming on her pale skin. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging. She looked at Bennett. She waited for the rage. She waited for him to stand up, to push Sienna away, to defend the mother of his child. Bennett looked at Elara. He looked at Sienna, who was breathing hard, looking triumphant. Then Bennett chuckled. It started as a low snicker and grew into a laugh. "God," he said, shaking his head. "You have to admit, Elara, you kind of walked into that one. Sienna's got a temper. Maybe you should apologize to her for ruining our dinner." The cruelty was so absolute, so total, that something inside Elara broke. But it wasn't her heart. It was the lock on the cage where she kept the sterling temper. Elara slowly straightened her posture. She didn't scream. She didn't lunge at Sienna. She simply reached into her soaked clutch and pulled out a napkin. She dabbed the corner of her mouth where a tiny drop of blood had formed. "Apologize?" Elara asked. Her voice wasn't trembling anymore. It was terrifyingly flat. "Yes, apologize," Sienna hissed, though she took a half-step back, unnerved by the sudden lack of emotion in Elara's eyes. "And then get out. Bennett and I have things to celebrate. I'm pregnant too, you know, and unlike yours, my baby will actually be wanted." That was the final nail. Elara looked at Bennett. "You're celebrating? I just made partner at the firm, Elara," Bennett boasted, adjusting his cuffs. "Big promotion, big bonus. Life is moving up, and frankly, you don't fit the altitude." "I see," Elara said. She reached into her bag again, but instead of her old cracked iPhone that Bennett constantly mocked, she pulled out a sleek black device. It was a satellite phone, heavy and industrial-looking. It had no brand markings, only a small silver crest engraved on the back, a lion holding a key. Bennett frowned. "What is that walkie-talkie calling a cab?" Elara pressed a single button. She held it to her ear. "Daddy," she said. Bennett rolled his eyes. "Oh, great. Calling the deadbeat dad you never talk about. What's he going to do? Come fix my sink." Elara ignored him. Her eyes locked onto Bennett's, staring deep into his soul. "I'm at the Obsidian Room," she said into the phone. "Code red, and Daddy bring the merger." She hung up and placed the phone gently on the table. "Code red." Sienna laughed a shrill, grating sound. "What are you 5 years old playing spy? You're pathetic." Alara sat back down. She crossed her arms over her chest. "I'm not leaving Bennett, and neither are you." "Excuse me." Bennett stood up, his face flushing with anger. "I think you've lost your mind. Security." He waved a hand at the large man standing by the door. "Get my wife out of here. She's hysterical." The security guard, a man named Greg, who had known Alara for 2 years and always looked at her with pity, hesitated. "Greg," Bennett barked. "Now, or I'll have your job." Greg sighed and walked over. "Mrs. Thorne, ma'am, please, don't make this hard." "Wait 5 minutes, Greg," Alara said calmly. "Just 5. "I'm not waiting 5 seconds," Sienna shrieked. She grabbed a glass of red wine from the table. "Get out or I'm wearing this." "Do it," Alara challenged. "Throw it." Sienna froze. The woman sitting in the chair wasn't the mousy housewife she had stalked on Instagram. There was something dangerous in the air. Suddenly, the music in the restaurant cut out. The lights flickered once, then went full bright, killing the romantic ambiance. The manager, a frantic Frenchman named Henri, came running out of the kitchen, his face pale as a sheet. He was holding a tablet looking at Bennett's table with pure terror. "Mr. Thorne," Henri stammered. There is a situation." "What situation? Get her out," Bennett yelled. "I cannot, sir," Henri whispered. "We have just received a transmission from the FAA. The airspace above the building has been locked down." "What?" Bennett frowned. "What does that have to do with me?" A low, thrumming sound began to vibrate the cutlery on the table. It started as a hum and grew into a roar. The liquid in Bennett's scotch glass began to ripple. The guests near the windows stood up, pointing outside. Is that a helicopter?" someone asked. "No," the senator at the next table said, his face draining of color as he looked upward through the glass ceiling. "That's not a helicopter. That's a military-grade transport." A massive black shadow descended over the glass roof of the obsidian room. Powerful floodlights blasted through the glass, blinding everyone in the room. The sheer noise was deafening. Bennett covered his ears. "What is going on?" Alara didn't flinch. She picked up a breadstick and took a calm bite. "My ride is here." The roof access door, usually locked and alarmed, was blown open with a precise mechanical thud. 4 men in tactical suits rappelled into the dining room. They didn't have guns drawn, but they moved with a lethal fluidity that screamed special forces. They wore patches on their shoulders, the same lion and key crest that was on Alara's phone. They formed a perimeter around table 4. Then the main doors of the restaurant were kicked open. A man walked in. He was in his 60s, but he walked with the vigor of a man half his age. He wore a 3-piece suit that cost more than the building they were sitting in. His silver hair was slicked back, and his eyes were like chips of blue ice. He carried a cane, not because he needed it, but because it had a solid gold handle shaped like an eagle's head, and he liked to point it at people he was about to destroy. It was Silas Sterling. The Silas Sterling. The man who owned Sterling Aerospace, the company that built the satellites the military used. The man who owned the bank that held the mortgage on Bennett's firm. Bennett's jaw dropped. He knew that face. Everyone in finance knew that face. It was the face of God in the business world. Silas walked straight to the table. The silence in the room was absolute. He looked at Sienna, who was trembling, the wine glass shaking in her hand. He looked at Bennett, who was paralyzed with confusion. Then he looked at Alara. His icy expression melted into pure heartbreak. He saw the red handprint on her cheek. He saw the water soaking her dress. "Elara," Silas said, his voice a low rumble. "I told you he was too small for you." "I know, Daddy," Elara said finally, letting a single tear fall. "I was wrong." Bennett choked. Daddy, you're Silas Sterling's daughter. You told me your dad was a mechanic." "He is," Elara said dryly. "He fixes things. Usually billion-dollar companies. Today he's fixing my mistake." Silas turned his gaze to Bennett. It was like a physical blow. "Mr. Thorne," Silas said, his voice terrifyingly polite. "You have exactly 60 seconds to explain why my daughter, the sole heiress to the Sterling Empire, has a bruise on her face. If I don't like the answer, I'm not just going to ruin you. I'm going to erase you." Bennett stammered, sweating profusely. "Sir, Mr. Sterling, I didn't hit her. It was a misunderstanding. Elara never told me. She lied to me. She wanted to see if you loved her," Silas said, stepping closer. Clearly the experiment yielded negative results. Silas turned to Sienna. She tried to smile, a seductive, desperate attempt to charm the billionaire. "Hi, I'm Sienna. I didn't know she was—" "Don't speak." Silas cut her off without even looking at her. "You're holding a glass of wine. You were threatening to throw it—" Sienna put the glass down so fast it nearly shattered. No, never." "I saw the security feed from the satellite," one of the tactical men said. "She slapped the subject at 1942 hours. Silas nodded. He looked at the tactical team leader. "Secure the perimeter. No one leaves. Especially not these two." Silas pulled a chair out and sat down right next to Bennett. He placed his cane on the table. "Now," Silas said, pulling out a fountain pen and a checkbook. "Bennett, you mentioned you just made partner at Vanguard Holdings, correct?" "Yes," Bennett said, his voice squeaking. "Yes, sir." "That's unfortunate," Silas said, beginning to write. "Why?" Bennett asked, trembling. "Because I just bought Vanguard Holdings while I was in the elevator," Silas said, tearing the check out and dropping it into Bennett's water glass. "You're fired." The water in Bennett's glass was still swirling, dissolving the ink on the check that Silas Sterling had just dropped into it. Bennett stared at the floating piece of paper, his brain unable to process the magnitude of the disaster unfolding around him. You can't just buy a company in an elevator." Bennett stammered, his voice losing its confident baritone and pitching into a desperate whine. "That's illegal. There are regulations, the SEC." Silas leaned back, folding his hands over the gold head of his cane. "Bennett, when you have enough money, the law is less of a wall and more of a suggestion. Besides, I didn't buy the company. I bought the holding group that owns the debt of the company that owns your firm. It took one phone call, and as the new majority shareholder, I find your performance lacking." Sienna, who had been frozen in terror, suddenly stood up. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a survival instinct that was almost impressive in its speed. "Bennett," she said, her voice trembling. "I think I should go. This is a family matter. I don't want to intrude." She grabbed her clutch and turned to leave. "Sit down," Elara said. The command didn't come from Silas. It came from Elara. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. She was still sitting, her hands resting protectively on her stomach, but her eyes were dry now. The shock of the slap had faded, replaced by a cold, burning clarity. Sienna hesitated. "Elara, look, I didn't know. Sit down," Elara repeated. Sienna collapsed back into her chair, looking at Silas with fear. "Thank you, sweetheart." Silas nodded at his daughter. He turned back to Bennett. "Now let's discuss the matter of your lifestyle. You see, I've had my auditors looking into your finances for the last 10 minutes. Amazing what you can find when you have military-grade decryption software." Silas pulled a tablet from his inside jacket pocket and slid it across the table. "Does the name Archipelago Ventures ring a bell?" Silas asked. Bennett's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. He reached for his scotch, but his hand was shaking so badly he knocked it over, spilling amber liquid onto the white tablecloth. I don't know what that is," Bennett lied. "It's a shell company in the Cayman Islands," Alara said softly. She looked at Bennett with pity, not love. "You've been siphoning money from our joint savings account, the one I put my inheritance from my dead mother into, and moving it there. You told me the market was down. You told me we lost money on bad investments." You knew," Bennett whispered. "I suspected," Alara said, "but I didn't want to believe it. I thought you were just bad with money, Bennett. I didn't want to believe you were a thief." "It's not stealing," Bennett yelled, causing the couple at the next table to flinch. "I was investing it. I was going to pay it back once the crypto market bounced back. I did it for us." "No," Silas interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. "You did it for her." He pointed the tip of his cane at Sienna. Silas tapped the tablet screen. A list of transactions appeared projected slightly, so Bennett couldn't look away. "Cartier bracelet, diamond encrusted, $14,000. Purchased 3 months ago. You told Alara you couldn't afford a crib." Silas read aloud. 2 weeks in St. Bart's. You told Alara you were at a conference in Chicago." Silas continued. "A down payment on a condo in Soho." Silas finished looking at Sienna. "In her name." The entire restaurant was listening now. The waitstaff had stopped pretending to work. They were standing in the shadows watching the demolition of a man who had treated them like dirt for years. Sienna looked down at her lap, her face burning. I didn't know it was her money. He told me he was rich. He told me he was a self-made millionaire." "He's a self-made fraud," Silas corrected. "And here is the kicker, Bennett. That money you stole, that wasn't just Alara's allowance. That was money tied to a trust. A sterling trust. Do you know what the federal penalty is for embezzling from a trust managed by a chartered bank?" Bennett shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Mr. Sterling. Silas. I can pay it back. I just need time. Don't ruin me. I'm the father of your grandchild." Silas laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "That is the only reason you aren't currently in the trunk of a car on your way to a black site in Nevada. My daughter is too kind. She wants you to survive this. But survival, that comes at a cost." Silas snapped his fingers. Henri, the manager, stepped forward nervously. "Yes, Monsieur Sterling." "Bring the bill," Silas said. "For the entire restaurant. Mr. Thorne is paying for everyone tonight." "What?" Bennett gasped. "I can't afford that. This place costs a fortune." "Consider it a severance package," Silas smiled cruelly. "Henri, bring the machine." Henri rushed off and returned with a credit card terminal. He handed it to Bennett. "Insert your card, Bennett," Silas ordered. It won't work," Bennett whispered. "Try it," Silas urged. Bennett pulled out his breathless black card, the one he flashed everywhere to prove his status. He inserted it with a trembling hand. Declined. The machine beeped loudly. "Try the other one," Silas suggested helpfully. Bennett tried his platinum card. Declined. "Debit card," Silas asked. Bennett tried his personal bank card. Declined. "It seems," Silas said, leaning in close, "that your assets have been frozen, pending a federal investigation into wire fraud." Bennett dropped his head into his hands. He was broken. Stripped of his job, his money, and his pride in front of the very people he tried so hard to impress. Alara stood up slowly. Her legs were shaky, but she held her head high. She walked over to Bennett. For a moment he thought she might hug him. He looked up, hope in his eyes. Alara reached out and took the Rolex off his wrist. "I bought this for your birthday," she said quietly. "With my money, I'll take it back." She turned to Sienna. "And the earrings, the diamond studs, those were my mother's. Bennett told me they were lost in the move. Take them off." Sienna's eyes widened. "You can't be serious. They're stuck. I can't." "Take them off," Alara said, her voice dropping an octave. "Or the nice men in the tactical gear will help you." Sienna frantically unclasped the earrings and dropped them into Alara's outstretched hand. "We're leaving now," Alara said, turning to her father. "I'm tired, Daddy. I want to go home." "Not to the penthouse, darling," Silas said gently, standing up and offering her his arm. "That's a crime scene now." "No," Alara smiled weakly. "To home. The estate." As they walked toward the exit, the tactical team parting to let them through, Bennett scrambled up from his chair. "Alara, wait! You can't leave me here. How am I supposed to pay the bill? How am I supposed to get home?" Alara stopped at the door. She didn't turn around. "You can walk, Bennett," she said. "It's good exercise. I hear it clears the head." The rain had turned into a torrential downpour as the convoy of black SUVs tore through the streets of Manhattan. Inside the lead vehicle, the silence was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of a rescue mission completed. Alara sat in the back, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that smelled like lavender, her father's signature scent. Silas sat opposite her, watching her with a mixture of pride and devastating guilt. "I should have stepped in sooner," Silas murmured, pouring a cup of herbal tea from a hidden compartment in the armrest. "I knew he was a snake the moment you brought him to that coffee shop 3 years ago. He didn't look at you, Alara. He looked at your shoes, your bag checking for labels." "I wanted to be wrong," Alara whispered, sipping the tea. "I wanted to believe that someone could love me for me, not for the sterling name. So I hid it. I thought if I played the poor, struggling student, I'd find true love." "You found a predator who likes wounded things," Silas said grimly. "But we've pulled the teeth out of the wolf." "Where are we going?" Alara asked, realizing they weren't heading toward the bridge to the Hamptons estate. They were heading deeper into the city. "We have one stop to make," Silas said. "The penthouse." "You said it was a crime scene." Alara frowned. "It is," Silas replied. "But there are things there you need. Not jewelry or clothes, we can replace those. But your journals, the nursery designs, the things that matter. And I think Mr. Thorne will be heading there to try and salvage what he can. We need to make sure the door is firmly closed." The convoy pulled up to the Obsidian Tower, the ultra-luxury residential skyscraper where Bennett and Alara had lived for the past 2 years. The doorman, a kind older man named Jerry, rushed out with an umbrella. When he saw Silas Sterling step out, Jerry nearly dropped the umbrella. "Mr. Sterling," Jerry gasped. Welcome." "Hello, Jerry," Silas said, pressing a $100 bill into the man's hand. "How is the family?" "Good, sir, thank you," Jerry stammered. He looked at Alara. "Mrs. Thorne, are you okay? You look pale." "It's Ms. Sterling, Jerry," Alara corrected him gently. "And I'm going to be fine. Has Bennett come back?" "No, ma'am, not yet." "Good," Silas said. "Let's go upstairs." They took the private elevator to the 50th floor. As the doors opened into the foyer of the penthouse, Alara felt a wave of nausea. This had been her home. She had cooked meals here, cried here, and dreamed of raising her baby here. Now it felt cold and alien. Silas signaled to his security team. "Pack everything that belongs to my daughter. Leave anything that belongs to him. Actually, Burn anything that belongs to him. Daddy, no burning? Elara sighed. Just put it in the hall. As the team began to move through the apartment with efficient precision, the elevator chimed. The doors slid open, revealing a soaking wet, disheveled Bennett Thorne. He had clearly run part of the way or failed to find a cab. His expensive suit was ruined, his hair plastered to his forehead. Behind him, looking equally miserable and mascara-streaked, was Sienna. Bennett froze when he saw the security team packing boxes. Then he saw Silas sitting on his Italian leather sofa inspecting a crystal vase. "What are you doing?" Bennett shouted, storming into the room. "You can't just break into my house. This is trespassing. I'm calling the police." "It's not your house, Bennett," Elara said, walking out of the bedroom, holding a small box of sonograms. "My name is on the lease," Bennett yelled. "I pay the mortgage." "You pay the mortgage with money you stole from me," Elara said calmly. "But the deed is in the name of Aurelia Trust." Bennett blinked. "Yeah, the landlord." "Aurelia was my mother's middle name," Elara revealed. "I bought this apartment 3 months before we met. I am the landlord Bennett. You've been paying rent to me." The color drained from Bennett's face. "What? And you're 3 days late on this month's payment?" Elara added. "So under the terms of the lease which I wrote, I am initiating an immediate eviction due to criminal activity on the premises." "Criminal activity," Sienna scoffed, wringing out her wet hair on the expensive rug. "Being a cheater isn't a crime, honey." "No," Silas spoke up, standing. "But keeping illegal narcotics in the master bathroom safe is." Silas gestured to the coffee table where a small bag of white powder sat next to a stack of cash. Bennett's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "That's not mine. You planted that." "Did I?" Silas raised an eyebrow. "Or did you get careless with your party favors now that you thought you were a big-shot partner? My team found it 10 minutes ago. The police are on their way up. I imagine they'll be very interested in the drugs and the embezzled funds and the assault on a pregnant woman." Bennett fell to his knees. "Elara, please, stop this. I'll leave. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't let me go to jail. Think of the baby. Do you want our child's father to be a felon?" Elara looked down at the man she had vowed to love forever. She felt a phantom pain in her cheek where Sienna had slapped her. "My child has a father," Elara said, placing a hand on her stomach. "He just hasn't met him yet. You're just a donor." Sienna, realizing the ship was sinking fast, tried one last desperate play. She lunged forward, grabbing Elara's arm. "Elara, listen to me," Sienna cried, her eyes wild. "He played me too. He told me you were crazy. He told me you trapped him. I'm a victim here, and I'm pregnant. You can't throw a pregnant woman out on the street." Elara pulled her arm away, repulsed. She looked at Sienna's stomach, then at her face. She saw the desperation, the lie behind the eyes. "You're not pregnant, Sienna," Elara said flatly. "I am. I swear." "You're drinking wine at dinner," Elara pointed out. "And you just ran 10 blocks in stilettos. And your left hand is shaking. You're going through withdrawal. I've seen the signs before. My uncle had the same problem." Sienna froze. "The baby was a lie to hook him, wasn't it?" Elara asked. Sienna's face crumpled. She looked at Bennett with pure venom. "He promised me a lifestyle. He promised me millions. Instead, I get a wetsuit and a felony charge." Bennett looked at Sienna, betrayed. "You lied? You're broke!" Sienna screamed back. "You're nothing!" The elevator chimed again. 2 uniformed NYPD officers stepped out, followed by a detective. "Bennett Thorne?" the detective asked. Bennett stood up, shaking. "I want a lawyer." "You'll need a good one," Silas said, checking his watch. I've already hired the best 5 firms in the city to represent Alara. That leaves you with, well, public defenders are hard-working people, I hear." The officers grabbed Bennett's arms. As they cuffed him, he looked back at Alara. "I loved you," he shouted a desperate final lie. "I loved you, Alara." Alara watched him being dragged away. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders lighter than she had felt in years. "No, Bennett," she whispered to the empty space where he had stood. "You loved the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes, and I just closed them." Silas put his arm around her. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" "Not yet," Alara said, looking at Sienna, who was standing awkwardly by the officers trying to look invisible. "Officer," Alara called out to the detective. "The woman, she assaulted me earlier tonight. There are witnesses and security footage." Sienna gasped. "Alara, no, I'm sorry. Press charges," Alara said firmly. "Assault and battery." As Sienna began to scream and thrash, as the second officer approached her, Alara turned and walked into the elevator, her father at her side. The doors closed on the chaos of her old life. "You handled that well," Silas said as the elevator descended. "I'm not done," Alara said, her eyes flashing with a new, terrifying determination. "Bennett was just the symptom, the system that let him think he could get away with it. That's the disease, and I have a lot of free time before the baby comes." Silas smiled a genuine, terrifying smile. "That's my girl. Now, about the nursery. I was thinking platinum accents. Gold, Daddy." Alara laughed, the first real laugh in a long time. "Let's stick to gold." The interrogation room at the 19th Precinct smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, a stark contrast to the lavender and old money scent of the Sterling limousine. Bennett Thorne sat handcuffed to a steel table, his bespoke suit drying into a wrinkled, stiff mess. Across from him sat not a detective, but his court-appointed lawyer, a weary man named Harold Finch, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Here's the situation, Mr. Thorne." Finch sighed, shuffling through a stack of papers. "The district attorney is throwing the book at you. Embezzlement, wire fraud, possession of a controlled substance, and assault." "I didn't assault anyone!" Bennett screamed, rattling the chains. "She slapped my wife, I didn't stop it." "In the state of New York, facilitation can be a tricky thing," Finch mumbled. "But that's the least of your worries. The fraud charges are watertight. The forensic accountants from the DOJ have already traced the transfers to the Caymans. But the real nail in your coffin, it's your girlfriend." Bennett froze. "Sienna, Ms. Miller." Finch nodded. "She cut a deal an hour ago. Complete immunity in exchange for testimony against you. She claims you masterminded the embezzlement scheme and forced her to open the accounts in her name under duress. She's painting you as a manipulative, abusive partner." Bennett stared at the wall. "She's lying. She spent that money. She begged for that money. Doesn't matter." Finch closed the folder. "She's crying on camera, and she's pregnant or claims to be, and the jury will eat it up. But there is an offer." "What offer?" Bennett asked, hope flickering in his eyes. "A plea deal," Finch said. 5 years in federal prison. Minimum security. You pay restitution. You sign away all parental rights to the unborn child." "Sign away my rights," Bennett snarled. "That's what this is about. That old man Sterling wants to steal my kid. If you go to trial," Finch warned, "you're looking at 20 years, and you'll lose custody anyway because you'll be a felon. Take the deal, Bennett." Bennett slammed his fist on the table. "No, I want a trial, and I want a paternity test. If that kid is mine, I have rights. Sterling money or not, they can't keep a father from his son." 3 weeks later, the atmosphere in the private wing of Mount Sinai Hospital was tense. The entire floor had been rented out by the Sterling family. Security guards stood at every elevator and stairwell. Inside the presidential suite, Alara was in labor. It wasn't the peaceful, glowing experience she had read about in books. It was pain, fear, and chaos. Her blood pressure had spiked dangerously pre-eclampsia, brought on by the extreme stress of the last month. "We need to stabilize her, doctor." Aris, the head of obstetrics, barked at the nurses. "Get the magnesium sulfate drip now." Alara gripped the bed rails, sweat pouring down her face. "Daddy," she gasped. Silas Sterling was right there holding her hand. The man who could crash stock markets with a whisper looked terrified. "I'm here, Alara. I'm not going anywhere." If I have to choose," Alara whispered, her eyes unfocused. "Save the baby. Promise me." "Don't you say that," Silas commanded, his voice cracking. "You are both coming home. That is an order." Outside the hospital, a circus had formed. The news of Bennett Thorne's arrest and the revelation of Alara's identity had turned this into the scandal of the decade. Paparazzi swarmed the entrance, and right in the middle of them, wearing a cheap suit and looking much thinner, was Bennett's mother, a woman named Dolores, who Bennett hadn't spoken to in 10 years, but who had suddenly reappeared when she realized there might be money involved. She was screaming into a news camera. "They are stealing my grandbaby! The Sterlings think they own the world! My son is innocent! He's a political prisoner!" Up in the suite, Alara screamed as another contraction tore through her. "The baby is in distress," Dr. Aris announced, checking the monitors. "Heart rate is dropping. We can't wait. We need to do an emergency C-section, now." As they wheeled Alara toward the operating theater, the doors burst open. A man in a suit tried to push past the security. It was a process server. "Legal papers for Ms. Sterling," the man shouted, waving a document. "Emergency injunction to halt any naming of the child without the father's consent." Silas Sterling didn't even look at the man. He simply nodded to his head of security, a giant named Marcus. Marcus stepped forward, grabbed the process server by the back of his collar, and physically threw him back into the elevator. "No visitors," Marcus rumbled. 2 hours later, the silence in the recovery room was broken by a soft, indignant cry. Alara blinked her eyes open. She felt heavy, drugged, and sore, but alive. She turned her head. Silas was sitting in a rocking chair holding a small bundle wrapped in a blanket woven from golden silk. The billionaire was weeping openly. "Daddy," Alara rasped. Silas looked up, his face beaming with a joy that erased 10 years from his age. "He's here, Alara. He's perfect." He brought the baby over. Alara looked down at her son. He had dark hair and eyes that looked like, well, they looked like hers. He was tiny, fragile, and absolutely beautiful. "He fought hard," Silas said softly. "Just like his mother." Did the lawyer come?" Alara asked, fear creeping back in. "He tried," Silas said, his face hardening. "But he was too late." "What do you mean? The birth certificate has already been filed." Silas smiled mischievously. "Electronic submission directly to the state records office, bypassing the standard delay. I have friends in Albany." "What's his name?" Alara asked, touching the baby's cheek. "That's up to you," Silas said. "But on the form under father it simply says unknown." Alara smiled weakly. "No, not unknown. Absent." "And the name Leo," Alara whispered. "Leo Silas Sterling." "Leo," Silas tested the name. The lion, fitting. Meanwhile, in a holding cell at Rikers Island, Bennett Thorne watched the small TV bolted to the wall. The news anchor was beaming. "Breaking news, heiress Alara Sterling has given birth to a healthy baby boy, Leo Sterling," Representatives for the family say mother and child are doing well. In related news, jury selection begins tomorrow for the trial of Bennett Thorne. Bennett stared at the screen. Leo, he muttered. My son. A large inmate sitting on the bunk above him laughed. Your son, buddy, look at that screen. That kid is wrapped in a blanket worth more than your life. That ain't your son. That's a sterling. You're just the guy who fumbled the bag. Bennett turned away, curling into a ball on the hard mattress. The reality finally hit him. He hadn't just lost a wife. He hadn't just lost a job. He had lost a dynasty. But as the darkness of the cell closed in, a thought sparked in Bennett's mind. A toxic, dangerous thought. He's a sterling, which means he's worth billions. And I'm still his father. Bennett closed his eyes and began to plot. 4 years later. The Sterling Foundation. Annual Gala was the event of the New York social season. It was held at the Met because, of course, it was. The Temple of Dendur was bathed in soft golden light. Champagne flowed like water. Elara Sterling moved through the crowd with the grace of a queen. She was no longer the mousy, insecure woman in the maternity dress. 4 years of running the Sterling Foundation, raising a child, and navigating the shark-infested waters of high society had forged her into steel. She wore a backless emerald gown that clung to her figure, her hair styled in a sleek, modern bob. On her wrist, she didn't wear a watch. She wore a simple gold bracelet with a charm shaped like a lion. Ms. Sterling, a reporter from Vanity Fair, approached her. The foundation just announced the new initiative for single mothers. Can you tell us about it? It's simple. Elara said, her voice confident and melodic. We provide legal aid and financial literacy courses to women exiting abusive or financially controlling relationships. No woman should ever be trapped because she can't afford to leave. Is this personal for you? The reporter pressed. Elara smiled a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Everything is personal, isn't it? Suddenly a murmur rippled through the crowd. The music didn't stop, but the conversation did. Heads turned toward the grand entrance. Walking up the steps wasn't a celebrity or a politician. It was Bennett Thorne. He looked different, older, harder. He had served 3 years of his 5-year sentence, released early for good behavior and overcrowding. He wore a suit that was clearly rented. It fit poorly at the shoulders, but he walked with a desperate, manic energy. Behind him wasn't a date. It was a camera crew. 2 men with large, shoulder-mounted cameras and a woman holding a boom mic. A live streaming setup. Security moved to intercept him, but Bennett held up his hands, shouting for the cameras. Don't touch me, I'm live. I'm live to 2 million people right now. If you touch me, it's assault. The security guards hesitated, looking at Elara for a signal. Elara felt a cold chill, but she didn't show it. She took a sip of her champagne and handed the glass to a waiter. Let him in, Elara said loud enough for the guards to hear. The crowd parted as Bennett marched toward her, the cameras capturing every angle. He stopped 10 feet away. Hello, Elara, Bennett said, playing to the camera. He adopted a sad, contrite expression. You look expensive. Bennett, Elara said coolly. I see you're out. I thought you had another year. The justice system saw that I was a changed man. Bennett lied. He turned to the camera lens. Guys, look at this. This is the mother of my child, standing there in a $10,000 dress while I've been living in a halfway house trying to get back on my feet. What do you want, Bennett? Elara asked, bored. I want to see my son, Bennett shouted, pointing a finger at her. I want to see Leo. You've blocked my letters. You've blocked my calls. You have a restraining order that is based on lies. The restraining order is based on the fact that you threatened to kidnap him during your sentencing hearing, Elara reminded him. I was emotional, Bennett argued. I'm a father fighting for his rights, and I'm here to show the world the truth. The Sterlings think they can buy people while you can't buy a father's love. He reached into his pocket. The security team tensed hands, moving to their holsters, but Bennett pulled out a small, wrapped gift. A toy car. It's his birthday next week. Bennett said, tears welling up in his eyes, a performance worthy of an Oscar. I just want to give him this. Please, Elara, don't be cruel. Let me see him. Just for 5 minutes. The crowd was uncomfortable. Some people looked sympathetic. Bennett was playing the underdog card perfectly. The evil billionaire keeping the poor father away narrative was strong. Elara looked at the toy car. Then she looked at the camera lens. You're live streaming this? Elara asked. Yeah, Bennett sneered. So the world can see who you really are. Good, Elara said. She snapped her fingers. A large screen behind the stage, usually used for donor presentations, flickered to life. Since we're sharing memories, Bennett, Elara said, her voice amplifying through the room's sound system. Let's share a few of mine. The screen displayed a video. It wasn't high production quality. It was grainy footage from a hidden camera. It was Bennett in the prison visitation room talking to Sienna, who had visited him once, to gloat. Bennett on screen. I don't care about the kid, Sienna. I care about the trust fund. As soon as I get out, I'm going to squeeze that bitch for every dime. I'll go on TV. I'll cry. I'll play the victim. They'll pay me $10 million just to go away. And the kid, I'll ship him to boarding school the second the check clears. The gasp in the room sucked the air out of the temple of Dender. Bennett turned pale, staring at the screen. That's a deep fake. That's AI. It's dated and time-stamped from the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Elara said calmly. And here's another one. The screen changed. It was an email chain magnified for everyone to see. Subject rights for sale. From Bennett Thorne to tabloid weekly content. How much will you pay for a photo of the Sterling kid I can get close? I know where they go to the park. I can snatch a pic or maybe grab him for a few hours. Let's talk numbers. You sent that 2 days ago, Elara said, stepping closer to him. The cameras were now zooming in on Bennett's sweating face. You aren't here for Leo. You're here because you owe your bookie $40,000 and you thought a public stunt would force a settlement. Bennett backed away. You hacked my email. That's illegal. Actually, Silas Sterling's voice boomed from the shadows as he stepped forward, leaning on his cane. You used the public Wi-Fi at the coffee shop across from my bank. You really should use a VPN, Bennett. Bennett looked around. The sympathy in the room had evaporated. It was replaced by disgust. The livestream chat, visible on the monitor of the camera operator, was scrolling with hate comments against Bennett. Get that camera out of my face, Bennett swatted at the cameraman he had hired. You wanted an audience, Elara said, her voice ice cold. Now you have one. Leave, Bennett. And if you ever come within 500 feet of my son again, I won't call the police. I won't call my lawyers. She took a step closer, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. I will call the mothers in my foundation. 500 women who have survived men like you, and I will tell them where you sleep. Bennett looked at Elara's eyes and saw something terrified him more than Silas ever could. He saw a mother who had killed the girl she used to be to protect the child she loved. He turned and ran. He literally ran, tripping over the hem of a display tablecloth, scrambling up and fleeing the museum to the sound of mocking laughter from New York's elite. Elara watched him go. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply turned back to the waiter. I believe I ordered a fresh glass of champagne, she said. Silas walked up to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't need me that time." "No," Ilara said, looking at the door where Bennett had vanished. "I didn't." "Leo is with the nanny upstairs," Silas said. "He asked if you were coming up to say goodnight." Ilara's face softened instantly. The steel melted, revealing the warmth underneath. "I'm coming." As she walked toward the exit, the reporter from Vanity Fair called out, "Ms. Sterling, what's the headline? What do we call this?" Ilara stopped and looked back over her shoulder, the golden light framing her silhouette. "Call it a correction," she said. 6 months later, the winter wind whipped through the streets of Jersey City, biting through the thin layers of Bennett Thorne's jacket. He sat in his rusted second-hand sedan, waiting for a ride-share ping. The heater was broken, and his breath fogged the glass. He had been blacklisted from every financial firm in the country. His friends had blocked his number. Sienna had sold her story to a tabloid for $5,000 and moved to Florida. Bennett was alone, drowning in legal debt, living in a studio apartment that smelled of mildew. He parked at a red light and looked up. A massive digital billboard towered over the highway. It flashed to a new ad. It was the cover of Forbes magazine. The image was stunning Ilara Sterling looking regal in a gold power suit, standing in front of a new children's hospital. Holding her hand was 4-year-old Leo, beaming with a smile that was bright enough to light up the city. The headline read, "The Sterling Standard, How Single Mother Ilara Sterling is Redefining Philanthropy." Bennett stared at the son he would never know, and the woman he had thrown away for a cheap thrill. He saw the strength in Ilara's jaw, strength he had mistaken for weakness. He saw the joy in Leo's eyes, joy he had tried to sell for a payout. "I had it all," Bennett whispered to the empty car, his voice cracking. "I held the world in my hands, and I dropped it." His phone pinged. A ride request. Passenger Sienna. Pickup 2 miles away. Bennett stared at the screen. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. He let the timer run out and declined the ride. He put the car in gear and drove into the dark, leaving the glowing image of the Sterling family behind him, forever out of reach. Miles away, in the warm, golden light of the Sterling Estate Library, Ilara closed a storybook. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a cozy glow over the room. "And they lived happily ever after," she read softly. "Because the dragon was gone?" Leo asked sleepily, curling into her side. Ilara smiled, kissing the top of his head. "No, my love, because the queen realized she never needed a king to build her castle." Wow, talk about instant karma. Bennett thought he was the main character, but he ended up being a cautionary tale. It just goes to show that money might buy you a penthouse, but it can't buy you class, and it certainly can't save you from a sterling woman scorned. I want to know what you think. Did Bennett deserve a harsher punishment, or is living with his regret the ultimate torture? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.